very full weekend, and we hope that you're all going to be able to, as I said, take part in it all and experience it all, and I think you will really enjoy it. I'd like to introduce to you Dr. John Bowman, our broadcaster and historian, who has very kindly agreed to come today and to launch our weekend.
Thank you very much. Anyway, a great pleasure to have been invited to launch today. And it made me think about how well we've really done on 2016 on the centenary, and the range of opinion and the range of events that have been brought forward during this centenary year. Because I can remember 1966 as the 50th anniversary, and I was writing a book recently, it was 3 or 4 years ago now, on the history. And to my great surprise, the RTE authority in the minutes coming up to the 1966 said that the coverage should be celebratory rather than analytical, and that it should be, an emphasis should be on the nationalist storyline rather than the socialist, that it should be Pearse rather, they didn't say Pearse rather than Connolly, but that was the idea. But I think our history is complex, and we're extraordinarily lucky that our history is complex, because if you're living in a country where the history is simple, then you're living in North Korea, and that's not the right place to be studying history. So that's just one point I wanted to make. The other point is about, I suppose, about this building, and I wasn't really that aware of how important De Valera's imprisonment in this building for the first 48 hours after the surrender. It was actually the first 72 hours in one way, because Pearse's instruction to surrender was 24 hours late, reaching Bowman's Mill. But his hours mattered in the particular period of Easter week itself. They mattered a lot, as is shown in the De Valera case. So De Valera, first of all, he was 24 hours later than the others when he got the instruction to surrender. And then he spent 2 days in this building before he was taken to Richmond Barracks. And it probably changed the whole course of Irish history, this building, because if you accept that De Valera's impact on Irish history since 1916 was what it was, and it was extraordinary, then to think of Ireland without De Valera and without his extraordinary impact, pluses and minuses, influence on others, influence on the sort of people with whom he worked, it's very difficult to imagine that the whole history of Ireland would not have been different had he been executed in 1916. And the most probable, and it's only a probability, but I think it is a probability, and this was new to me, and therefore I thank you very much for inviting me to give this talk, or to say a few words at this opening. What was new to me was the role which that delay in being in this building may well have had on whether or not he was executed. That's probably what saved De Valera, is that he was being considered, his execution was being considered changed the course. This building therefore changed the course of Irish history. You know, I declare the exhibition open.
Well, we've tried to involve a number of our colleges and centres in this, because there's been a lot of activity during 1916, even in the colleges and centres. So we have music from the period, which has been performed by the staff and students from Kylemore College, and that's going on all over the weekend, and it's lovely singing and music performance. And then, as well as that, we have an exhibition on food from the period, which was prepared by Inchicore College and Crumlin College, and they have lots of food for people to eat, gur cakes and various different foods from the time. And they also have prepared what a prisoner would have as their daily ration. So that exhibition is on. Then we also have an exhibition on Eamon de Valera, which was lent to us by his nephew Eamon O'Queeve. Eamon de Valera was incarcerated here in the building after his arrest, and he credited that with that he credited the fact that he wasn't executed with the fact that he had he'd been held prisoner here, and by the time he was brought to Kilmainham, the executions, I think, were easing off. We also have an exhibition in Ballsbridge College of Further Education. That is in conjunction with the local historical society, and they are also leading walks from here and from Ballsbridge College. So there's a lot of activities on over the weekend. We also had a rap from Colorsa Owen, but we couldn't really fit them in with the period detail here, I think. But that's another interesting little part of all of our preparations and activities.
And then of course there's the whole open house aspect of it as well.
Yeah.
It fits in with that weekend.
Yeah.
Tell us a bit about how that fits together.
Yeah, we fitted in with the open house as a weekend because we were going to do a 2016 commemoration. Then we thought, well, it's a beautiful building, it would be nice to open it to the public. The building was built in 1880. The date is up on the stained glass window at the top of the stairs. You've probably seen that. It's a really lovely building, and it was built as offices for the town commissioners, designed by Edward Carson, father of the Edward Carson, and there's an awful lot in the building that I think is of historical interest. There are beautiful windows, there's lovely workmanship, beautiful fireplaces, and I think it's nice that the public can see it. The other thing is that it's not a museum, it's a living building, and it has been worked in since it was built. It's still an office, and the boardroom that we had our presentation in today was at where we hold our own board meetings, was the boardroom where Joshua Manley would have also sat with the town commissioners and would have done his own work. So I think it's a very important historical building because there aren't that many buildings which are still actually performing a similar function and being used in very much the same way.
So we're located just across the bridge from the town hall, but the college itself actually dates back in 1902. And so here this weekend we have an exhibition on the Ballsbridge College before 1916, during 1916 and up to the present day, just emphasising, I suppose, that it was there before 1916. John Holohan, the local history society, who are so central to this weekend really as well, because it's all done in collaboration with the local history society, and we're very proud of the fact that they held their first lectures here at their foundation 10 years ago in Ballsbridge College, and the local history society has gone from strength to strength since then. So John Holohan and the local history society have organised an exhibition of rarely seen photos and images of Ballsbridge from around the year 1916 here in the college.
Well, good afternoon, everybody, and you're extremely welcome. The history of this area goes back to the Fitzwilliams, who Norman knights came to the 13th century. They were the Lords of Merrion. Merrion on the Strand was the original name of the area, in fact, because the area down at Sandymount was originally Brickfields and Scarlet Hill. The total area was, in fact, Merrion. However, over the time, a man called Nicholas Ball had a farm on what's now Herbert Park, and he was the first person, reputedly, in 1588, to put a stone bridge across the Dodder. Before that, you crossed by a ford. Later on, then, the area began to be called Ballsbridge, but its boundaries are not really discernible because a lot of people think they live in Ballsbridge, but not always, because the original boundaries and area were defined in ecclesiastical and in civil terms as Donnybrook Parish, which extended right around Ringsend and out to Booterstown, and the township of Pembroke, because the Pembrokes became the successors to the Fitzwilliams through marriage. Of course, in the 18th century, the main thing was to marry a good heiress. Coming up to date, just 10 years ago, our Ballsbridge Donnybrook Sandymount Historical Society was formed here in the local library next door, and we have been very lucky over the years in having a very good following, and there are lots of events and lectures that we have, and if you consider joining, do by all means call into Pembroke Library and talk to Liz or Angela there. However, it's not my function to continue talking, but just to give you an insight into the history. So the history includes an awful lot of buildings, including this building here. The oldest house is the one opposite the RDS, the red house beside the public house, the Horseshoe House. that house dates back to about 1750 or 60, and that's the oldest existing house in the area. Apart from that, the bridge was built in 1791, and as it says, it was widened in 1904. So if you come to our exhibition over in the college, which I would advise you to do, there are lots and lots of photographs and images there. There's a photograph of the whole bridge and area here, which shows about 1905 or 6, just after the bridge was widened. So one's able to look at it and see the trams and the cars passing by, and you know that the bridge was widened in 1904. It shows the line that it has today, so therefore that picture has to be just after 1904. Thank you very much.
Sharon O'Doherty, who was one of our drama teachers in Inchicore College of Further Education, has written the play, and she's produced the play, and the play is performed by the students from Inchicore. And she has captured everything. She brings you right back into 1916 to Joshua Manley and the people here in the town hall. It's called The Clerk's Tale because it's based on an account that Joshua Manley, who was then the town clerk of Pembroke, an account that he sent to the town commissioners in May of 1916. He wrote to them and he sent them what was effectively a day-by-day diary of the events of 1916.
Well, I was asked if we could do a presentation on the eyewitness diary of Joshua Manley, who was the town clerk here in this building during the 1916 Rising. And what he did was he notated everything that had happened to him and got it put into the minutes of the Dublin City Council. So I offered to write and direct it. I thought it would be a great opportunity, to do something different for the Rising, dealing with a very human story. And so that's what we did. And I chose our second chairs because they were the most free at the moment. We're doing other shows at the moment. And so I wrote it for them, specifically for them. Just writing these little scenes coming from the diary. And it worked out really well because I was able to bring in other stories and tie them into Joshua's story, which I believe, I would conjecture did happen. All factually correct now, may I say. And I think one other thing too is the proclamation of that the martial law. And I suddenly went, I don't know what was in martial law. I don't know what the restrictions were that he was trying to deal with, getting passes, and how did he manage that? So I have a scene where the General McConchie is arriving with the Sherwood Foresters in Kingston, and he reads that to the audience as if they're the soldiers, because I reckon the soldiers didn't understand what it was either, Well, I think for young actors, but also young Irish people, to have an opportunity to explore sort of this episode of 1916 and then actually come and perform it on site, it's an unusual and wonderful thing to do. And for them, it really brought history alive for them. Though we were rehearsing in our college in Inchicore, and to come over here and then rehearse here, and then to actually be in the room where Manley walked, see the offices where they all worked, see where De Valera was held. They took ownership of it completely.
I avoided the troubled areas. There are troops stopping people, though I was questioned only once.
So your presence is most welcome and your efforts much appreciated.
So Richard, first, tell me a little bit about the drama and about how your grandaunt Maggie was portrayed in the drama and how much you learned from it.
Well, I thought it was very inclusive and very informative. It more or less ties up with a lot of the information that I've been able to gather, and most of the information I've gathered is anecdotal, unfortunately. I have great difficulty in proving the information I'd like to prove. Maggie was shot from the back window of 103 Haddington Road, and I believe it was the bedroom window. There was a spray of 10 bullets went through the window, and one of them killed her. When I say killed her, I believe what actually happened was that when they carried her, and as it was well described in the drama, to Baggot Street Hospital, that she didn't die immediately or on the way, that she died sometime afterwards. And I'm very anxious to get information from the hospital records, which I haven't succeeded in doing so. Whether they have any knowledge, I do know it was dreadful confusion at that time.
Her father's been upstairs and went to look out of the window in her bedroom. They were brewing tea, sitting on the road. One of them saw her and alerted the others. They shot a spray of bullets towards the window. There was pandemonium, of course, and there were no ambulances to be had, so we laid her on a mattress and then tied her to a ladder and took her to the hospital in Bagot Street.
It's often really, the focus is often about the big stories and about the GPO and stuff like that, but clearly, like, for your family, a 13-year-old girl dying is a poignant tale. Do you think that they got that? Was the drama sad? Was it powerful?
It was. It certainly, I couldn't imagine, you know, the tragedy of the event for the members of the family. I do know that the Mulhollands, as Teresa described, were they doted on Maggie, and she, in the letter, she describes how she was very fond of a particular pet dog that the Mulhollands had, and that dog was whining in, you know, in the loss of Maggie very sorrowfully. So that was very interesting. Again, it's a small human experience, you know, of the time. But the description in the letter of the hail of bullets flying around, of a priest attending to somebody dead in the middle of the road and bullets flying over his head, and mentioning various people who were locked in and needed some attention or needed some support or help, it's fascinating, absolutely.
And does an event like this give you a chance to meet other people who would have connections with that or information from that era?
Oh, no question about it. And the more events like this, the better, because how does information pass at its very best is the interaction between people.
Well, Elizabeth O'Farrell came to him first of all and told him that they were to surrender. Now, he didn't accept her word for it and said, I want the order from Commandant MacDonagh. And he was always very strong that his commanding officer, and they were in an army, was Thomas MacDonagh. But before she came back, he had found out that they had all surrendered, and he decided to surrender. So they had taken prisoner a cadet called McKay, and he was sent to find a British officer, and De Valera went to Sir Patrick Dunn's hospital, and according to Captain Hitson, he came in and he covered them with the gun, and he said, are you armed? And De Valera said he wasn't, and he told him that his men would surrender. And what happened then was that De Valera went back to the barracks, that De Valera went back to where his men were, and he gave the order with a whistle to come out. They came out, and he gave the order to ground arms, and he always said that he remembered the crunch of the arms hitting the ground. So Captain Hitson, who was a very humane man, took the surrender, and they were marched out here to Ball's Bridge. The men were billeted in the RDS, and De Valera was held in this particular building within here. So they came out apparently Northumberland Road, even though the surrender was in Sir Patrick Dunn's hospital, they came down Northumberland Road to come here. Nothing happened until 1938. And in 1938, of course, it was all over the British papers that there was an agreement being arrived at between the British government and the Irish government, ending the economic war, giving back the ports and so on. So in a very, very generous spirit, Captain Hitson, who was retired at this stage, wrote a letter to Neville Chamberlain, the Prime Minister, and offered to return the binoculars. And all the correspondence exists, and to make a long story short, at the final signing of the Anglo-Irish Agreement, Chamberlain produces the binoculars and gives them back to De Valera, and there's a letter in De Valera's own hand written that evening to Captain Hitson saying that he was very, very pleased to get the binoculars back, and saying that he was glad that he had come through the Great War, as he called it, safely. When I was at lunch, and after the lunch at the House of Keys, I went into this room and all of these scrapbooks were on the table before me. They belong to a lady called Anne Hersey, who is the grandniece of Captain Hitson. Now, Hitson and his wife had only one daughter, Vivian, who actually worked in the British Embassy in Dublin in the 60s. But she didn't get married and had no children, and this grandniece inherited this collection. Phil Gond, one of the officials working with him, who had worked in Dublin for many years, knew who I was, knew Mrs. Hersey very well, knew that she had the treasure trove, and he was the agent to bring us together. And very kindly, last autumn, she emailed me and said, would you like a loan of all of this material? But apparently, Captain Hitson had a huge admiration for my grandfather, and that's expressed very, very clearly in his letters, and you know, had no ill feeling. And he says that in his description of 1916, that there was no bitterness between either side. One final issue that, in my view, he came here for 66, and he was at the commemoration in Boland's Mills of the 50th anniversary with my grandfather, and some great photographs of that. But more importantly, at the invitation of the 3rd Battalion, and all the letters are here, he came over in 1948 for the annual dinner of the 3rd Battalion Old IRA. And the letters are quite interesting. They ask him to come over. They know about the binoculars. He says, I'd love to come over. Then they ask him to be the guest speaker on the night. And he writes back and he says, no, he said, you have all your fiery speeches, he said, because I'm a modest man and I'm not a public speaker. And you have all your fiery speeches and I'll come in afterwards. And then he mentions that his daughter and his wife are going to come over and do a bit of shopping, and promptly they write back and say, you're the guest speaker, we want you to be our guest speaker on the night, you're our special honoured guest, and there's a ticket for your wife and your daughter as well. And you could see, and they talk about the word reconciliation and so on. So you see a rapport even at that stage, built up not only between De Valera and Hitson, but between the men of the 3rd Battalion, and over the years there were Christmas cards exchanged and good wishes and so on. So it's an extraordinary connection,